Okay, we're on page 1254. The end of the second chapter. In the second chapter, Achashverosh gets himself a queen. The only criterion for her position is that he finds her beautiful. That's all. There's no other qualifications. He set it up so that the girl will have only that qualification, so that she has no independent authority, no independent position, and he can get rid of her like that. I just don't like you anymore. I'll get another one. That's what he wanted, because he didn't want to repeat a Vashti. And Esther refuses to identify herself, even though the king wants it from her. He can't demand it because he's so charmed by her. He doesn't want to take. He can't do it. He just can't do it. But he wants it, and he creates all sorts of strategies to try to get other people to reveal it. He releases debts from the provinces, and he gives gifts, and he gathers virgins into the capital another time to frighten Esther into thinking, well, since she's not doing what I want her to do, I'm going to get a replacement. Nothing moves her. Nothing moves her. Because she does what Mordechai tells her to do, and Mordechai said, don't reveal who you are. So there is this tension built into the situation, and that tension will bear fruit towards the end of the Sefer. Okay, now comes a completely different incident. This is verse 21. Those days, when Mordechai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigsan and Seresh, two of the king's servants, of the guardians of the threshold, became angry and plotted to lay hands on King Achashverosh. The Shloch Yad in Hebrew. The plot became known to Mordechai, who told it to Queen Esther. And Esther informed the king in Mordechai's name. The matter was investigated and elaborated and corroborated, and they both were hanged on a gallows. It was recorded in the book of Chronicles, in the king's presence. Now, if you're good at reading novels, all this should make your hair stand on end. What do I care how the king found out? What do I care that Esther told it to the king in Mordechai's name? What do I care that it was written in the book of Chronicles in the king's presence? Who cares who wrote it down and when they wrote it down? Whether he knew that they wrote it down. All of this lays for the plot that's going to happen towards the end of the Sefer. And one thing that's going to become important later is one thing that's not mentioned. Mordechai saved the king's life. Wouldn't it be good business to reward that? Sort of encourage other people to save your life? Kings are often the target of plots. And if you want to have a long kingdom by having a long life, then you should encourage people to reveal plots so you can save your life. It is very strange that there's no mention of any reward that Mordechai got for saving the king's life. And as we'll see, the reason why there's no mention of it is because there wasn't any. But then if there wasn't any, I have to ask, why not? So we'll get to that when we see the upshot of it. But that's why we have to take it with us from this particular small event. After these things, King Achashverosh promoted Haman, the son of Hamdasa, the Agagite, and advanced him. So we mentioned that from Mordechai we have his lineage back to the tribe of Binyamin. And here we have the lineage of Haman going back to Agag. Who was Agag?
The king of Amalek.
He was the king of Amalek. In what period?
In Shaul's time.
In Shaul's time. And what happened? What was the interaction between Shaul and Amalek?
Well, Shaul didn't kill the king right away, so he was able to, to impregnate somebody and continue Amalek's existence.
Right. Now, to complete the picture, just tell me one more thing. What tribe did Shaul come?
Binyamin, yeah?
Yeah, from Binyamin. So what the text is indicating to you here, without making an explicit statement, what it's indicating to you here is, this is a replay of history. It was Binyamin against Amalek. Mm-hmm. The king who comes with Binyamin against Amalek. And he didn't complete the job in the appropriate way, and he lost the kingdom thereby. He lost his position as king. Shaul did. Mm-hmm. So here it is over again. Amalek is the enemy, and the hero who's going to destroy him is Mordechai from Binyamin. This happens often. If you read behind the scenes where people come from, sometimes it's lineage, and sometimes it's Gilgul, reincarnation. You have these linkages of replays of events in hundreds of years before. So that's exactly what's going on here. So the king promoted him, advanced him, set a seat above all the officers who were with him. He made him what we would call the prime minister. That's what prime minister means. It means the first among all the ministers. All the king's servants at the king's gate would bow down and prostrate themselves before Haman, for this is what the king had commanded concerning him. Now, there are different interpretations of what's going on here. I'm going to follow the interpretation that's closest to the text. This is a political law. The king commanded, he's my prime minister, I want people to bow down and show him honor. Had no indication of idol worship here, even though there is such an upshot in some commentators. I'm not going to use that in explaining the story. So now, you may imagine that this would create a crisis for Jews. Bowing down? Okay, it's the king's command. But bowing down to another person? You are aware that there's no crisis here at all? Do you know a case where the Torah records a person bowing to a person, a Jew bowing to a person?
Plenty of times.
Plenty of times. How about one?
I think different rabbis would bow down to each other when...
I'm sorry, I meant the Torah, the Chumash.
Oh, in the Chumash? Oh.
Okay, Yaakov bowed down to Esau 7 times. Oh. But of course there he felt he was under threat of death. You know, Esau came with 400 men to create a massacre.
Abraham bowed down to those angels before he invited them in.
So Abraham bowed down to the angels, and that's a good example. It's not clear whether he knew they were angels or not. It happens to be a machlokes in Mefarshim. Some commentators say he didn't know that they were there. So he bowed down. It's just a way of showing respect. Do you know a more dramatic example? How about Moses bowing to his father-in-law?
Oh, yeah.
His father-in-law comes to visit him, and he prostrates himself on the ground in front of his father-in-law. It's a way of showing respect.
Did Avram bow to Melchizedek?
No.
No, okay.
That's very interesting. I don't know what position, an interesting question, what position did Melchizedek have? Would you have expected it or wouldn't you have expected it? Do we have to explain why he didn't or not? I don't know. I don't know.
And Moshe didn't bow down to Pharaoh, obviously.
I'm not sure about that. But let's see now. What happened when Yaakov met Pharaoh?
Joseph's brothers bowed down to him when they thought
That's right.
he was the Pharaoh.
That's right. Well, they didn't think he was a Pharaoh. Everybody knew he was Mishnah Melech. Everybody knew that he was. But yes, I imagine that everybody bowed down to Pharaoh. But it doesn't say Yaakov. But Yaakov was the patriarch. He was the patriarch, the father of the savior of the nation, and so on. Maybe he didn't have to bow down. I don't think he did. Yeah. But so bowing down to a person does not have to indicate worship. It can only indicate respect. And here the king says, I have a law, and I want people to bow down to my prime minister because he's prime minister. Indeed, the way we look at these things, by bowing down to the prime minister, you're honoring the king. What makes him special? Because he's the king's prime minister. That's who he is. It's not because he is who he is. because he fulfills a function for the king. If the king will fire him tomorrow, you won't bow down to him anymore. So this is a way of honoring the king. Now we'll have to see what happens. But Mordechai would not bow down nor prostrate himself. Okay, now you got to picture this. The king makes a law. When Haman comes into the public square, everybody should bow down. Mordechai's there, in public, and doesn't bow down. Under normal conditions, what would you expect the response to be? What would you expect to happen now?
He would be arrested.
He'd be shot on the spot. disobeying the king's order in front of the king's palace in public, hang him from the nearest tree. Watch what happens. Watch what happens. This is more evidence for the proposition that the king is weak and is worried about popularity, about popular acceptance. So the king's servants at the king's gate said to Mordechai, "Why do you disobey the king's command? Why do you do that?" Now, finally, when they said this to him, day after day, "Hey, Mordechai, you're disobeying the law. Have a nice day, guys. Go drink coffee. Thanks for reporting." Day after day, and they just leave him there, day after day, and they ask him day after day. It's amazing. And he did not heed them. They told Haman to see whether Mordechai's words would avail, for he had told them that he was a Jew. Aha. So he did give some explanation. He said, "I'm a Jew." In other words, he wants a religious exemption. He wants a religious exemption. Now, if the Goyim were clever, they could have said, "Well, what about all the other Jews who are bowing down?" But they didn't figure that out. Mordechai was special. He was the head of the He was one of the heads of the Sanhedrin. He was someone special. Maybe he has different rules. He says, "I want a religious exemption," and they gave it to him. Oh, your religion doesn't allow you. Perfectly all right. We are very tolerant here. It's a multicultural society. We respect different customs and different modes of living. Your religion, the rule doesn't apply to you. Even that is astonishing. We talk about an ancient emperor over 127 provinces. Right? But now they want to check. So they tell Haman. So what good does telling Haman do? When Haman, this is 5, when Haman himself saw that Mordechai did not bow down and prostrated himself before him, then Haman was filled with rage. Now, so you need a little oral supplement here. Haman comes in, there are 200 people in the square, they all bow down. He walks by with his nose in the air, too elevated to notice them, and he walks into the palace, confer with the king. Now he hears Mordechai's not bowing. Really? A lot of people here. I can't see all of them. Some of them behind trees. Some of them are sitting at tables. And some of them, who knows? Mordecai's here. I'm going to check. I'm going to check as I walk close to him, right by him, and see if he bows. Okay. So now here's the trick. If it's a religious exemption, but he knows that in the Jewish religion, there's no problem with bowing to show personal honor. So he says, if I walk right past him, then that'll be like, I'm putting in the comparisons, that'll be like Yisrael coming to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's like the two travelers coming to Abraham. If he refuses to bow when I walk right past him, then it's a personal insult to me. It's not a question of the king's law, whether the king's law requires an exemption, because there's no exemption for showing personal honor. That I know. Jews are not forbidden to do that. So let's test it out. He walks right past him, within his dollar amas, as we would say, and Mordechai remains, doesn't bow down, and then Haman knows that it's not a religious exemption. He's doing it only to spite him, and then he's filled with anger. Now, he knows. They planned. It's this interpretation, so forth and so on. Tell the king and kill him! No. He just, the king is going to be reluctant to do that. The king doesn't push his own honor, doesn't push his own laws. He takes counsel with advisors to find out what the das is, what the normal procedure is. He's afraid to do it. Yeah.
Was that the right assumption, or what was actually Mordechai thinking in this case? Was that a fair
I
assumption?
think that's a good question. That's a very good question. We'll come to it in part when I get to the end, and I tell you some of the things Rav Dessler says about the whole story.
Okay.
But I hope I don't forget it. If I do forget it, you can remind me. So, now watch this for psychology. Haman was filled with rage. 6. However, it seemed contemptible to him to lay hands on Mordechai alone. 4. They had made known to him the people of Mordechai. Here's this Jew. This Jew is thumbing his nose at me. I'm going to take notice of that, and I'm going to take revenge on him. It's contemptible. It's small. It's undignified. It's belittling that I should do so, because they told him the people of Mordechai. Now this will help explain why Mordechai wasn't rewarded when he saved the king's life. Who are the Jews in this society? You have 127 provinces. Each province has its population. They have their local government. They're a semi-independent political entity. Not the Jews. Jews were conquered by Nebuchadnezzar. They were taken to Babylon in chains. And although they are spread out, they have no common piece of geography that belongs to them. They have no national institutions. They're rabble. They're riffraff. One of the riffraff does something, and you pull the whole force of law, or you take your own private, actually the people say, you noticed him? You paid attention to him? What's the matter with you? Haven't you got more important things to think about? Your prime minister is you're determining matters of state for 120 provinces, and you know that this Jew, the fact that he didn't bow down, what's the matter with you? They're very small-minded. That's what he's afraid of. He's afraid of his honor. He's afraid of his honor. Being looked at as a small-minded, trivial person.
He's a smart man.
Well, he wasn't dumb. That's true. He wasn't dumb. He made some mistakes, but he wasn't dumb. That's right. That's absolutely right. So he's fiercely angry, but he's not going to do anything. So what's the alternative? Look again what he says here. It seemed contemptible to lay hands on Mordechai alone. A single Jew. That's going to be contemptible. But Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the entire kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordechai. And that way I'll get Mordechai. I really don't care about the Jews. No. But if I go after the Jews, I'll get Mordechai indirectly. No one will say it's a personal vendetta between me and one single Jew. All I have to do now is figure out a strategy for getting the king to agree to annihilate the Jews. Now some say that Memuchan, the one who created the spin on Vashti's rebellion and the way of getting rid of her and cementing Ahasuerus' popularity with the kingdom, which is the men, of course, not the women. They don't count. This Memuchan is also Haman, the same guy. And here he has his strategy for undoing the Jews also. And it's also clever. I mean, it shows that he's smart. There's no question that he's smart. You're absolutely right.
Wow.
He's not emotionally intelligent.
So, yeah, that's true. That's true. That's Grolman's book, Emotional Intelligence.
One person.
Yeah. In the first month, the month of Nisan, 12th year of Ahasuerus, that's when this is all taking place. Pur, that is, the lot, was cast to the presence of Haman from day to day, from month to month, to the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Now this seemingly part of a verse has a lot in it. First of all, he casts lots to determine what to do. That's part of his culture and his religion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the text says something astonishing here. Purim. Oh, maybe I forgot. I'm writing this for Hebrew speakers. Maybe they don't know Persian. I'll tell you. It's the lot in Hebrew, right? The Goral in Hebrew. Hey, the book's written in Hebrew. Just say Goral. Why are you putting a Persian word and then translating it into Hebrew? Well, what's going on? The whole book is written for people in Persia who speak Hebrew. The whole book is written in Hebrew. At the very least, the book is telling you the word poor means something. That's important. You should know that it means it. It's also important you should know that in truth it is the lot, the Torah, which means that the word poor would carry some connotation which isn't the meaning of Goral. And the fact that it means something else is important for the story. We'll talk about that. Talk about that at the end. I just had to see in 2 words in a text something very important. Furthermore, he's in the first month, in Nisan, right? And the lots come out for Adar, which is 11 months hence.
Wow.
That also is going to play an important part in the scenario. It's a long time away. Okay, so that's the day of the disaster. But, of course, that's he did privately with his own private sorcery apparatus. He still has to get the king to agree. So that's the next step. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, now look at this. Look at the way you undermine and play to the weaknesses and worries of a king. There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed. Well, I think the usual mefozar means scattered, meforad means divided. And some say, if you're scattered over the whole countryside, then of course you're divided, you're not all in one place. This means they aren't unified among themselves. Scattered among the peoples of the provinces of your realm. Their laws are different from every other people's. They do not observe even the king's laws, therefore it is not befitting the king to tolerate them. Let's see. Number 1, they're geographically scattered. Number 2, they're internally disunified. Number 3, they're different from every other people's laws. I can hear the king saying, yeah. Okay, what's for dessert? So what? Well, who needs to know all about this? Why is this all important? Oh, I'm coming to the climax now. Okay, they don't keep your laws. Isn't the order a little funny? First of all, why didn't he just say, there is a people who has a policy of not keeping your laws? So full stop. And so let's go after them.
Because the argument's not valid and he's building it up.
He wanted to make it seem like it would be an easy task to get rid of them.
He wanted to make it seem like it would be easy and not unpopular. Not unpopular. Because they're different from all the other peoples. They're not going to have any support. If you go after them, no one else is going to care. No one's going to care because they have no power, they have no influence, and their mode of life is different from everybody else's. If you deal away with them, it won't matter to anyone. Because he knows the king is deathly afraid of losing his popularity. So that's what he speaks to first. If he starts by saying, there's a group that doesn't obey your laws, the king hears, uh-oh, maybe I should do something with them. But uh-oh, I'm going to risk my popularity, and uh-oh, I'm going to be in a weak position. So Muhammad doesn't want the uh-ohs to happen. So he starts, before he knows what it's about, saying, there's this group of people, they're scattered, they're disunified, different from everybody, they have no position, they have no allies. Yeah, they are. And they disobey your laws. And the king will say, let's see, disobey my laws. Should I do something? Well, I already know that they're scattered and disunified and have no allies. So I guess it's okay. It's quite reasonable to do that. That's the cleverness of Haman, and you see what he's playing to. You see the insecurity of the king is exactly what he's playing to. Now, so what's the practical measure? If it pleases the king, let it be recorded that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 silver talents, whatever kind of currency that is, into the hands of those who perform duties for deposit in the king's treasuries. Okay, he's a smart guy. He's making a mistake, isn't he?
Yeah.
What mistake is he making?
Trying to use the king's money.
What?
He's trying to use the king's money.
Why is that a mistake?
He gave him permission. It's not like.
He's asking the king for permission. No, think back to the day before yesterday. What was one of the purposes of the banquet? To show off his wealth. Why was he showing off his wealth?
Shows power.
Because I'm not in anybody's pocket. I don't owe anything to anybody. My policies are my policies. Nobody can manipulate me. Nobody can maneuver me. We've had cases, I think in the history of England in particular, where the king leaned on nobles for financial support. If the king wanted to make a war, if the nobles said no, there was no war, because the king couldn't pay for the soldiers. So Achashverosh has made a point of publicizing the fact that he's in nobody's pocket. And here Haman wants to give him a bribe. He should have known the king's going to say no. And of course he says no immediately, the king. So the king took his signet ring from his hand, gave it to Haman, son of Hadassah, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "This silver is given to you." The very first thing he says, the money you wanted to give to me is given back. The people also to do with it as you see fit. You say, I should destroy them, you're my prime minister. I'm leaving it up to you, and you can do it any way that you like. I'm convinced that it's a good project. I'm not going to take any personal interest in it. Okay. Now, the king's secretaries were summoned on the 13th day of the first month. This is the 13th of Nisan. Keep the date in mind. That's the day before what? Passover. Passover on the 15th. Right? That's going to be very important. 36 hours is Pesach. And everything was written exactly as Haman had dictated. The king's satraps, whatever they are. You don't know what it means in Aramaic, in Persian either. Governors of every province, the officials of every people, each province in its own script, and each people in its own language. We saw that already when the king sent out the messages after Vashti, right? They had employed a civil service where for every one of the 127 provinces, you had people who spoke the native language of that province, so that no one could claim later, well, it was written in the king's language, and I had to translate it, interpret it, and I misunderstood what this word means, and so therefore we didn't do it exactly, and so on and so on. No. It came out of the palace, translated into everyone's local language. And sealed with the king's signet ring. You know what that is. They put hot melted wax on the document, and the signet ring leaves an impression in the wax. That's how you know it comes from the king. And no one else can have a ring that has that shape on it. Letters were sent by courier to all the king's provinces. Now, the Malbim has a very sophisticated analysis of the next few psukim, but let's read through them and then I'll tell you what he says. Letters were sent by courier to all the king's provinces to destroy, to slay, and to exterminate all Jews, young and old, children and women, in a single day. The 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. The 13th day. This is the 13th of Nisan, and it's scheduled for the 13th of Adar, exactly 11 months later. And to plunder their possessions. Not just to kill all of them, but to take all their possessions. The copies of the document, that's also a Persian word, were to be promulgated in every province and to be published in all peoples, that they should be ready for that day. The couriers went forth hurriedly by order of the king, and the edict was distributed in Shoshan, the capital. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was bewildered. Mordechai learned of all that had been done. Now, the Malbim has some difficulties here. He says, if you think there's one proclamation, just one, and in the proclamation you have all the details, that in 11 months, the 13th of Adar, all the Jews in the kingdom are going to be exterminated and their possessions plundered. If that's what you think is going on. Number one, why should the people in Shushan be bewildered, puzzled? They know what's in store. They know what the decree is. They should be in despair, wailing in the streets, or gathering money to make bribes, or bewildered is a funny kind of reaction, number one. Number two, if you're a Haman and you want this to work, it's stupid to give your enemy 11 months notice. A lot of things can happen in 11 months, including assassinations. Why would you do that? So the Malbim says there were two letters, not one. One letter, as he says in the beginning, they wrote it and they sent it to all the governors, all the officials. To the governors and officials, there was sent a notice that there's going to be, in 11 months, a slaughter of the Jews. But that was only to high officials, and they were to keep it secret. In addition to that, there were like wall posters, in China when they put up the wall posters. The 13th of Adar is a special day, 11 months from now. Be prepared. Like, these serial advertisements that they mentioned. No, not even that. The serial advertisements that they thought of about 10 years ago. The first week comes around and says, happy cows. Happy cows. Happy cows. Man, what is that? That's what they want. And the next week it comes out, our milk chocolate is the sweetest milk chocolate because we make it from the happiest cows. But they stimulate your interest by giving you an announcement which you can't understand, and you wonder about it. This is as old as Haman, 2,300 years ago. His first announcement, public announcement, was something's going to happen on the 13th of Adar, and nobody knows what it's going to be. That's why the city of Shushan is bewildered because this is not common in the way in which a king runs a kingdom, and it's inherently very peculiar to be told 11 months from now something's going to happen. And then chapter 4 starts with Mordechai knew what happened. Mordechai knew the truth. Doesn't say how he knew the truth, but he knew the truth was that the 13th of Adar was dedicated to destroying the Jews. That's why he puts on sackcloth and ashes and wailing through the streets, and nobody else knows why, because it's not public. That makes sense out of the verses, even though you have to put in something that isn't strictly literally there, but it makes sense out of the verses. Yeah.
Why does it only say Shushan was bewildered? Then all the other provinces also should be bewildered, right?
Yeah, but you're forgetting that they didn't communicate by SMS. It took
But they sent it
5
to the
days.
provinces.
Yeah, but it's reporting the immediate event here. That's when it'll be 5 days from now. That'll be 6 weeks from now, and that'll be right. Each one will be when the thing happened. And he will mention that the other ones. But he's dealing now with what Mordechai did and how he responded and so on and so on. It's spread out over time. So Mordechai learned of all that had been done. Mordechai tore his clothes, put on sackcloth of the ashes. He went out of the midst of the city, cried loudly and bitterly. He came until the front of the king's gate. Not even now. The gate could be 10 feet thick. You understand? Massive doors and boulders and everything that they used to shut it up. So there's a whole area with a wall on this side, a wall on this side, and the gate that closes it. That's called the king's gate. You can't enter into that area with sackcloth and ashes. That's forbidden by law. So he came up to the entrance, but did not set foot inside. So forbidden to enter the king's gate, clothed with sackcloth. In every province, this answers your question, where the king's command and his decree extended, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, most of them lying in sackcloth and ashes, because contrary to Haman's plan, It didn't work. It leaked out. Now, if you like, it's Shushan's a capital city, and that's why Achashverosh made an extra week of celebration, and everybody was involved. Big people, the street cleaners as well as the ministers. Everybody was involved. Everybody was treated well, because you want the people in the capital on your side, because otherwise, information spreads. Information can be leaked, and it can do you terrible damage. You're the king. And it can be done anonymously so that you can have no control over it. But if the people in Shushan feel that they benefit from you, then they're not going to do that. But that's one way that information gets out. There were scribes. There were translators who wrote the documents to the officials. 127 provinces. How many scribes and how many translators were there? 100. And among 100 people, someone could leak it. That could happen. There was no choice, because if it didn't go out that way, it wouldn't be official. It wouldn't be an edict from the king.
Someone was a friend among the Jews?
So, but the truth is, Mordechai knew. Mordechai knew not because of a leak. Either it was Ruach HaKodesh.
And he told the other Jews.
That's right. He told the other Jews, and then as the document spread, the underground communication systems of Jews spread the information also. Okay.
Haman didn't foresee that, like, now the Jews are making a big difference in their actions, and how somehow they probably know now because they're mourning.
He may foresee it, but there's nothing he can do about it. There's absolutely nothing he
He
can
could change
do.
the date. He could bring it up.
No, he can't, because as you'll see, that and we saw it before also, when an edict is sent out in the king's name, it cannot be changed. It cannot be changed. And I'll tell you why. This is also, all this I read, I'm not such a sophisticated political thinker or social thinker. Let's imagine that the king sends out an edict to 127 provinces, but it's under his control and he could change it. You live in province number 73. You live 500 miles from the capital. The edict comes. You say, okay, that's what's written in today's edict, but maybe next week, maybe 2 weeks from now, maybe there'll be a change. Maybe I shouldn't rush to implement it, because if there's going to be a change, I'll be on the wrong side of the new edict. You introduce an uncertainty into the administration of the kingdom. That's why you can't ever take back what the king's edict says. You cannot do that. You can't change it. And this will be one of the puzzles for Mordechai and Esther when they plead for mercy for the Jewish people. The king says, perfectly all right, just don't take back the decree. That you cannot do. That you cannot do. And I told you that Esther understands her part in the story. She understands the role that she plays vis-a-vis the king, just like Haman understands. She understands also, and she keeps a low spirit. She doesn't suggest things and offer things and make banquets for herself. She knows exactly what her role is supposed to be. But then, when she pleads on behalf of the Jewish people, she says, "Let the decrees authored by the wicked Haman be recalled." Now, she's got to know that's illegal. She's got to. She's living in the palace for years, right? So I interpret, I could be wrong, she's playing dumb. Oh, it's so terrible. Please, king, call them back, and nullify them. He says to her, "You're a woman, you got it wrong. You're lovely, I'm enchanted by you, but not by your brains." No. You and Mordechai, you're in charge, write whatever you like, but don't contradict what was written before. And that becomes a puzzle. How to write it in such a way as to save the Jews, and yet not contradict. And they solved the puzzle. There's a way logically to solve the puzzle.
Was the decree specifically that people have to go kill the Jews, or that they are allowed to kill the Jews without repercussions? Because with that understanding, then if the Jews have every right to fight back, then they're just soldiers following orders.
That's the story. That's the exact story. It says it's open season on Jews. It's free to kill Jews and take their property. And Mordechai and Esther write a subsequent edict the days it was permissible for the Jews to defend themselves, and
But it wasn't an order like soldiers. It was like you could do it if you
no,
want to. But you
anybody
don't
and
have to
everybody, the whole population.
if they want to.
That's right.
It's not an obligation. So there, it could
That's
have been like no one. It could be like 50 people that would go out killing Jews and no one else.
You know what happened in Poland? You know what happened in Czechoslovakia? You know what happened in Russia? Won't be 50 people. Lots and lots and lots of people.
Anti-Semitism spreads
And they're the same.
disease.
Ad kedei kach, you have these tragic cases where after the Second World War, Jews came back to places in Poland that they were from, and the non-Jews saw them, and the non-Jews said, he's coming to get his house. We're living in his house. So they killed them. They killed Jews in Poland after the war to protect the property that they had stolen from the Jews. You'll have lots and lots of willing executioners. There's not, there's not just 50 people who, but when the prime minister is a Jew and the queen is a Jew, then things look different. That's the levers that they have. Okay, I'm giving away some of the end of the story, but that's right. So this was, this was the reaction of the Jews. Fine. Okay, I'm going to stop here because now comes an exquisite interaction between Esther and Mordechai, which could be the model for marriage. I think it's one of the most exquisite models that we have, and we'll see it on Sunday, this session.